Today we are going to learn about the Bhagavata Purana. The Puranas are sacred texts. Much of what goes by the name of Hinduism today can be traced to the Puranas. There are many of these Puranas, but 18 of them are major and therefore known as the Mahapuranas. The Bhagavata Purana is such a major Purana and is usually placed fifth in any list of the Mahapuranas. Sometimes it is also referred to as the Srimad Bhagavata. Any major Purana is supposed to have 5 characteristics. Lakshana. It should describe the original creation, Sarga, the periodic process of destruction and recreation, Pratisarga, the solar and lunar dynasties, Surya Vamsa, Chandra Vamsa, the 14 eras, Manvantara, and genealogies, Vamsanucharita. As you will discover, the Bhagavata Purana does all this and more. The Bhagavata Purana has 18,000 couplets, sloka. As Puranas go, it is thus a medium-sized Purana, not terribly long and not too short. The text is split up into 12 sections, skandha, and each skandha has several chapters, adhyaya. The first skandha has 19 chapters, the second 10, the third 33, the fourth 31, and fifth 26. The sixth 19, the seventh 15, the eighth 24, the ninth 24, the 10th 90, the 11th 31, and the 12th 13. The 10th skandha is the longest. It is also the most popular amongst the faithful because it describes many of Krishna's exploits. In fact, the Bhagavata is very much of a Krishna or Vishnu Purana. What do we mean by that? The Hindu Trinity consists of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. Since all three are important gods, any Purana will talk about all three, but the relative emphasis given to one as compared to the other two varies across the Puranas. Those which attach a lot of importance to creation give more emphasis to Brahma and are known as Rajasika Puranas. Those which concentrate on Vishnu and his 10 avatars, incarnations, are called Sadvika Puranas. And those who devote a large part of the text to rituals and customs and to Shiva are known as Tamasika Puranas. The Bhagavata Purana is a Sadvika Purana. All the Mahapuranas were supposed to have been composed of Vyasadeva or Vedavyasa. Of course, Vedavyasa is simply a title or generic name. Many individuals have held the title, and despite what tradition says, the Mahapuranas could not have been composed by a single person, nor were the Puranas composed to at any point of time. To each Purana, stories and incidents continued to be added over the year. Thus, it is difficult to date the composition of any Purana, but generally speaking, the Mahapuranas were all composed between 300 AD and 1000 AD. The Bhagavata Purana is clearly one of the earlier ones to have been composed. Incidentally, Vedavyasa is also credited with having composed the Mahabharata. Let us now get straight into what the Bhagavata Purana has to say. Suta and the other sages. Many years ago, some sages, rishis, desired to go to heaven, Sarga. They therefore began to perform a yagna, sacrifice, in a forest known as Namisaranya. The sacrifice was a difficult one, and all the assembled sages were resting when Sutta arrived on the scene. Sutta was himself a sage and was the sage Romaharsana's, alternatively Lomaharsana's son. Suta was also extremely learned in the Puranas and the Sastras, sacred texts. The assembled sages welcomed Sutta with offerings and said, Sutta, not only are you learned in the Sastras and the Puranas, you have also interpreted them. This is Kali Yuga, the last of the four eras where evil reigns supreme everywhere. People are no longer interested in righteousness. Moreover, men do not live for as long as they used to earlier. They therefore have less time to devote to the hearing of the Sastras. Tell us briefly the essence of the Sastras. Vishnu was born as Krishna, the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, to rid of the world of evil. Who knows about Krishna more than you? Tell us about Krishna and his exploits. Sutta was very happy that the sages had asked him about Krishna. He began to tell them the story of Bhagavata Purana, Vishnu's 24 incarnations. Usually, 10 incarnations, avatars of Vishnu are mentioned in the Puranas. The Bhagavata Purana, however, mentioned 24 incarnations. Vishnu has an original form which cannot be normally seen. He has many legs, thighs, hands, mouths, eyes, ears, and noses. It is from this original form that the incarnations are created, and it is also from this form that Brahma was created. Vishnu's first incarnation was as a celibate Brahmana, the Brahmanas being the first of the four classes. The duties of Brahmanas were to pray and devote themselves to the study of the Sastras. Vishnu's second incarnation was a wild boar, Varaha. In this form, he rescued the world from the depths of the underworld. In his third incarnation, Vishnu adopted the form of the great sage, Narada. As Narada, he instructed men about the virtues of being devoted to Vishnu. In the fourth incarnation, Vishnu adopted the form of two different sages. Their names were Nara and Narayana. These two sages performed very difficult tapasya, meditation. Vishnu's fifth incarnation were also as a sage. This sage name was Kapila. There was another sage named Asuri. Kapila instructed Asuri about the school of philosophy that is known as Samkhya Darsana. In his sixth incarnation, Vishnu was born as the son of the sage Atri and his wife Anusuya. The name that Vishnu adopted in this incarnation was Dattatreya. As Dattatreya, Vishnu instructed Alarka, Prahalada, and others on the path to true knowledge. The seventh incarnation took place during the rule of Vyayambhuva Manu, the first Manu to rule over an era, Manvantara. Vishnu was now born as the son of Ruchi and Akuti, and his name was Yajna. Yajna held the title of Indra during the first Manvantara. Vishnu's eighth incarnation was as Rishabha, the son of King Nabi and Queen Maru. In this incarnation, he instructed even the most learned of scholars about the best form of meditation. The ninth incarnation was as a king. In fact, the sages has asked that Vishnu might be born as a king from the word for asking, prathana, and king came to be called Prithu and the earth known as Prithivi after the king Prithu. Prithu milked the earth and obtained all the herbs and plants which were then handed over to the humans. Vishnu's tenth incarnation Vishnu's Vishnu's tenth incarnation was as a fish Matsya. Vishnu's tenth incarnation was as a fish, Matsya. This took place during the Manvantara that was known as Chaksusha Manvantara. At this time, the whole world was flooded with water. The Manu who ruled over the Manvantara was known as Vaisvata Manu as a fish. Vishnu told Vaisvata Manu to build a boat and save himself and the rest of humanity from the waters of the flood. The 11th incarnation was at the time of churning of the ocean, Samudra Manthana. Vishnu now adopted the form of a turtle, Kurma. The gods, Devas, and demons, Asuras, churned the ocean with Mount Mandara as a churning rod, but this would not have been possible had there not been a base on which Mount Mandara could rest. This base was provided by the back of the turtle. As the churning of the ocean continued, Dhanvantara came out with a pot of Amrita, a life-giving drink in his hand. Dhanvantari was Vishnu's 12th incarnation. Dhanvantari was also the originator of all medical knowledge. Together with the gods, the demons also wanted a share of the Amrita. But Vishnu adopted the form of a beautiful woman and so charmed the demons that they gladly parted with the Amrita. This was Vishnu's 13th incarnation. Hiranyakasipu later became the king of the demons and began to oppress the gods. So Hiranyakasipu had to be destroyed. Vishnu did this in his 14th incarnation known as Narasimha because the being was half man and half lion. This man beast tore apart Hiranyakasipu's breast with its claws. After Hiranyakasipu, Vishnu became the king of the demons. After Hiranyakashipu, okay, this is not clear, became the king of the demons and drove the gods out of heaven. Vishnu's 15th incarnation was that of a dwarf, Vamana. The dwarf came to Vali and desired that it might be granted as much of land as could be encompassed in 3 of its steps. The generous Vali did not refuse, but the dwarf adopted a gigantic form, and in 3 of its steps it covered all the 3 worlds. Thus Vali had to surrender heavens to the gods. There was once a time when the kings on earth became evil and began to ignore the Brahmanas. The king were Kshatriyas. The Kshatriyas constituted the second of the 4 classes, and their primary duty was to bear arms and protect the world from evil. The Kshatriyas Okay, let me repeat this. The Kshatriyas constituted the second and the 4th classes, and their primary duty was to bear arms and protect the world from evil. When it was found that the king had themselves become evil, Vishnu was born as Parashurama. Parashurama. This was his 16th incarnation. Parasurama destroyed all the Kshatriyas in the world 21 times so that the good might once again prevail. Thereafter, the 17th incarnation was born. This is Vedavyasa, son of Parasara and Satyavati. Vedavyasa recompiled the sacred texts of the Vedas so that they might become more easily understandable to men. It was thus that there came to be 4 Vedas. Vedavyasa's real name was Krishna Dvaipayana. He came to be known as Vedavyasa because he had divided the Vedas. The 18th incarnation was Rama, about whom you must have read in the Ramayana. The 19th and 20th incarnation were born as Yadavas. Their names are also familiar to you, this time from the Mahabharata. The 19th incarnation was Baladeva or Balarama, and the 20th was Krishna. The 21st incarnation was Buddha, the originator of Buddhism. The 21st incarnation is yet to come. It will be Kalki, the son of a Brahmana named Vishnu Yasa. Kalki will arrive at the end of Kali Yuga and destroy the evil of the world, and a new righteous order will be established. Although the Bhagavata Purana has promised to talk about 24 avatars of Vishnu, it actually lists only 22. It, however, points out that such incarnations occur whenever there is evil on earth and there is a need to destroy evil and establish righteousness. Accordingly, there have been several incarnations. Vedavyasa and Narada. Vedavyasa had a son named Sukadeva. Sukadeva was a great sage. He was learned and free from all worldly illusions, but he never displayed his knowledge, so that most people thought him to be ignorant and stupid. Vedavyasa divided the Vedas into 4. This sacred text came to be known as Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. Vedavyasa taught the 4 Vedas to 4 of his disciples. Paila was taught the Rig Veda, Vaisampayana the Yajur Veda, Jaimini the Sama Veda, and Sumanta the Atharva Veda. The Puranas are known as the fifth Veda. Vedavyasa later taught the Puranas to his disciple Romaharsana, and the Romaharsana was the father of the Suta, the narrator of Bhagavata Purana. But despite having done all this work on the Vedas, in addition to having composed the Mahabharata, Vedavyasa was intensely dissatisfied. His hermitage, ashrama, was on the banks of the river Saraswati. After having bathed in the river, Vedavyasa sat in his hermitage and began to ponder about what he might do next. It was then the sage Narada arrived on the scene. Vedavyasa asked Narada, "Why are you looking so miserable? You have accomplished much that one ought to feel proud about." "I don't really know why I feel dissatisfied," replied Vedavyasa. "You are all knowing. Why don't you tell me why I keep feeling discontented?" "That may be because you have spent too much time in describing dharma, that which is righteous," said Narada. "These descriptions are too impersonal. Most people need that is not personalized. Most people need that which is more personalized. Most people need that which is more personalized. Dry words of dharma do not mean very much. The cause of dharma might have been better served had you described the exploits of Krishna. That would have made it much more personal. Why don't you do that? You alone are capable of accomplishing a task like that." Thus encouraged by Narada, Vedavyasa composed the Bhagavata Purana and initially taught it to his son Sukadeva. Ashvathama's punishment. Many Kaurava and Pandava warriors died in the course of the Kurukshetra war. Towards the end of the war, Bhima and Duryodhana fought a duel, and Bhima broke Duryodhana's thigh with a mace. Duryodhana lay there on the ground, defeated but not yet dead. Aswathama had fought the war on Duryodhana's side and was looking for a way to please the disconsolate Duryodhana. Draupadi had 5 sons, the son of the 5 Pandavas. In the dead of the night, Aswathama entered the Pandava camp and sliced off the head of these 5 sons. He then brought them as gift to Duryodhana. It was now Draupadi's turn to be disconsolate, and she demanded revenge. Arjuna promised her that he would bring her Aswathama's head as atonement. He therefore hunted out Aswathama and challenged him to a duel. Aswathama let loose a terrible divine weapon known as Brahmasira on Arjuna. To counteract it, Arjuna had to release a Brahmasira weapon of his own. But these two divine weapons threatened to burn up the entire world, and the sages asked the two warriors to withdraw their weapons. Arjuna did that easily, but Aswathama did not know how to withdraw a Brahmasira weapon, so that weapon was directed at Uttara's womb. Uttara was Arjuna's widowed daughter-in-law. His son Abhimanyu, having died earlier in the course of the battle, Aswathama was captured and brought to Draupadi by Arjuna. There it was decided that Aswathama should not be killed. He was, after all, the son of Dronacharya, the teacher of the Pandavas. Aswathama used to wear a jewel, Mani, on his head. This jewel was cut off and given to Draupadi, and Aswathama was allowed to leave. But what was to happen to the Brahmasira weapon that had been directed at Uttara's womb? Uttara came running to Krishna for protection, and Krishna himself entered the womb and so protected the baby. The baby was Parikshit. Since the baby had been protected by Vishnu in this form of Krishna, the Brahmanas proposed that he should be named Vishnuratta, that is protected by Vishnu. But the baby had met Krishna inside Uttara's womb and had become devoted to Krishna. Whenever the child met someone, he tested to see if the person he had just met was indeed the person whom he had met inside the womb. The word for a test is pariksha. Thus it was that Vishnurata came to be popularly known as Parikshit. Krishna's return to Dvaraka. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas' brother, became king after the end of the Kurukshetra war. For some time, Krishna stayed in the capital city of Hastinapur, but thereafter he had to return to Dwaraka, the capital of the Yadavas. Great was the rejoicing in Dwaraka when Krishna returned. Musical instruments were played. Women climbed up to the roofs to catch a glimpse of Krishna. The Brahmanas blessed him as he walked down the streets. Before entering the city, Krishna blew loudly on his conch shell. Dwarka was a very pretty city. The trees bore all sorts of fruits and flowers. The houses had creepers on them. The ponds were gay with lotuses. Beautiful gardens were scattered throughout the city. There were many gates, all of which were decorated with pennants and flags. The shops and streets were clean. Krishna had 16,000 wives. They were very glad that their husband had come back after such a long time. Krishna's death and destruction of the Yadavas. After some time had passed, Arjuna went on to visit to Dwaraka. Months passed, but Arjuna did not return. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira could see all sort of ill omens in Hastinapur. People became evil. The seasons did not thrive at their appointed times. Relatives fought with each other and friends became enemies. Yudhishthira became seriously worried and decided to send Bhima to Dwaraka to find out what was happening there. Why had Arjuna not come back despite the fact that 7 months had elapsed since his departure from Hastinapur? But before Bhima could be sent, Arjuna returned. He was no longer his old self. He sat quietly without uttering a word. Silent drops of tear rolled down his cheek. Yudhishthira was beside himself with worry. What happened? What has happened, Arjuna? He asked. Are our friend in Dwaraka well? Why aren't you uttering a word? Or is it that you yourself are not well? For a long while Arjuna could not bear to say anything, but eventually he told them that Krishna had died. The Yadavas had been destroyed as a clan. The Bhagavata Purana will describe this incident in the 11th skandha. But hearing that Krishna had died, Yudhishthira decided to rule no more. The 5 Pandavas and Draupadi left for the Himalayas. Parikshit was made king in Hastinapur. Parikshit. Parikshit was a good king. He always consulted the Brahmanas before taking any major decisions. He married Iravati, the daughter of Prince Uttara. Parikshit and Iravati had 4 sons, the most important of whom was Janmejaya. Parikshit also performed 3 Aswamedha yagnas, horse sacrifices on the bank of the river Ganga. Parikshit's guru, teacher was Kripacharya. One day, Parikshit heard that the demon Kali had entered his kingdom. The Kali Yuga era had started as soon as Krishna had died. But in this particular incident, Kali invaded Parikshit's kingdom as a person. As soon as Parikshit learned that his kingdom had been invaded, he dressed himself in his armor and took up his weapons. He then ascended his chariot and with his army set out to conquer the world and fight Kali. The earth is divided into 7 regions or dvipas, one by one. Parikshit conquered each of these dvipas. He forced the conquered king to pay him taxes. In the course of his travels, Parikshit came upon the world Prithvi wandering around in the form of a cow. The cow was talking to a bull, and the bull was none other than the god Dharma in disguise. The cow and the bull were conversing about the evil that had befallen the earth. A Sudra belongs to the lowest of the 4 classes, the duty of the Sudra being to serve the other 3 classes. When Parikshit came upon the bull and the cow, a Sudra was in the process of beating the 2 animals up. The animals shook with fear as they were being beaten by the Shudra's mace. Parikshit shouted at the Sudra, "What do you think you are doing? Have you no shame or fear? You deserve to be killed." He consoled the 2 animals and took out his sword to kill the Sudra. But the Sudra was none other than Kali, and Kali fell at Parikshit's feet and begged for mercy. The king could not kill someone who was begging for mercy. So he spared Kali and told him that Kali was not to live inside Parikshit's kingdom. Otherwise, lies, jealousy, theft, and quarrels would become commonplace in the kingdom. This put Kali in a dilemma. Where was Kali going to live? Parikshit's kingdom extended throughout the world, so Kali begged the king to tell him where he might live. Parikshit earmarked certain places as Kali's habitat. These were the places where gambling, drinking, and violence took place. As long as Parikshit was king, Kali was thus permitted to do no harm. Once Parikshit had gone on a hunt. After chasing deer for a very long time, felt thirsty. The king felt hungry and thirsty. He looked for a place where he might get some water to drink, and this search brought him to the hermitage of a sage. The sage was meditating, oblivious of what was going on in the world around him. His hair was matted and his body was clothed in deer skin. Parikshit asked the sage for some water, but the sage did not bother to reply. At this, Parikshit felt slighted. There was a dead snake lying there, and there was a dead snake lying there in front of the hermitage. Parikshit picked up the dead snake with his bow and wound it around the soldier of the sage. The king then returned to his capital. The sage son was very powerful. He had been busy playing with his friends when all this had happened, but when he returned and discovered what had happened, he was extremely angry. How dare a Kshatriya king insult a Brahmana? He therefore cursed Parikshit that the king would die of snake bite within the span of 7 days, and the snake which would do the deed would be the snake named Takshaka. The sage got to know of the curse that his son had imposed on Parikshit and was not at all happy. The sage name was Samika. Samika told his son, "What have you done? The king is our protector. What will happen to us if the king dies? Moreover, Parikshit is a good king. You have levied a heavy punishment for a minor transgression." Meanwhile, back in the capital, Parikshit was also struck with remorse. He realized he should not have thus insulted the sage. He resolved that not only would he never act like that in the future, he would also undergo penance, prayaschitta, for the sin. While the king was thus pondering, news was brought to him about the curse that had been imposed to him. Parikshit bore this news with fortitude. He was prepared to atone for his sin, and if it was destined that he should die at the hands of Takshaka, then so will it be. But prior to dying, he decided that his death should take place on the banks of the holy river Ganga, and he would devote the 7 days that would left to him in left to him to the contemplation of Krishna. Parikshit therefore began on a fast on the banks of Ganga. He meditated and thought of Krishna. Many sages assembled to witness this wonderful spectacle. The king was delighted that all these sages has come because that meant that his last moment on earth were blessed. Parikshit's son Jan Janmejaya had also come, and Parikshit handed over the kingdom to his son. The gods and sages were delighted to see the calm with which Parikshit were facing up to his fate. Flowers were showered on the king's head from heaven. At that time, Vedavya's son Sukadeva also arrived there. He was only 16 years of age, but so holy that all the sages stood up to honor Sukadeva. Parikshit also worshipped Sukadeva and said, "I am honored that you have come here. Tell me what a man about to die should hear." And so began Sukadeva's narrative. The great form of Vishnu. Shukadeva said, "Most people are ignorant. They are obsessed with material pursuits. They do not realize that all these are merely illusions, Maya. True bliss comes from knowing Vishnu. The Bhagavata Purana tells of Vishnu, and I learned the text from my father Vyasadeva. You are devoted to Vishnu, so I will relate to you the Bhagavata Purana. When death knocks at one's door, one should forget about material pursuits. One should go to a holy place and prepare to meditate. The best incantation mantra for meditation is that which goes by the name of Omkara, the chanting of Om repeatedly. This chanting calms the mind. The senses are controlled and one can contemplate God. Yoga is the technique of uniting the human soul, Atman, with the divine essence, Brahman. And yogis are people who are trying to achieve this union. A yogi has to sit in a proper posture, asana, and has to control his breath in the process of meditation, pranayama. It helps to fix one's mind on the great form of Vishnu. Vishnu's great form is everywhere. It is the beginning of the past, the present, and the future. The form is shrouded in the five elements and the ego. But within the form is the being who is the object of all yoga. The underworld rests at this being's feet. The earth is near the thighs and the sky is at the navel. This great form of Vishnu is known as Vishwarupa. Near the breast of the being is heaven, Swarga, surrounded by all the stars. Higher up on the body are the higher region. The entire universe is divided into 14 lokas. Seven of these from the underworld, and their name are Attala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala. Seven other lokas form the upper region, and their names are Bhuloka, Bhurvaloka, Swarloka, Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka. Thus, the being's throat is Maharloka, the mouth, Janaloka, the forehead, Tapaloka, and the head, Satyaloka. Indra and the other gods are the arms of the being. The four directions are his ears. The two Asvinis are his nose, and his mouth is the flaming fire itself. The sun is Vishnu's eyes, day and night are his eyelashes, and his smile is Maya. The oceans form his armpits, the mountains his bones, the rivers his veins, and the trees are the hair on the body. The wind is Vishnu's breath, and the clouds are nothing but his hair. The Brahmanas have a place near Vishnu's mouth, the Kshatriyas near his arms, the Vaishyas, the third of the fourth classes, near his thighs, and the Sudras near his feet. This Vishwarupa of Vishnu is everywhere, and it is this Vishwarupa that one must concentrate on in the process of yoga. Having heard all this, Parikshit gave himself up to the contemplation of Vishnu. He forgot his wife, sons, house, wealth, and the kingdom, but he nevertheless wanted to know more about Krishna, Vishnu's incarnation on earth. He asked Sukadeva to tell him about Krishna, and this is what Sukadeva proceeded to do, beginning with the story of the creation. Creation. Although Brahma is regarded as the creator, Brahma himself owes his creation to Vishnu. Vishnu created the three gunas, qualities, for the purpose of creation. These three qualities are Sattva Guna, Raja Guna, and Tamaguna. Sattva Guna relates to knowledge and is associated with the gods. Rajaguna relates to the activity and is associated with the senses. Tamaguna relates to matter and is associated with the five elements. In the beginning, there were only the great egg, Brahmananda. For thousands and thousands of years, the egg floated on the waters that were everywhere. Then a being came out of the egg. This was nothing but Vishnu's great form. It had thousands of thighs, legs, hands, breasts, faces, and heads. The learned know that all the 14 worlds were created from the great being. The seven lokas that constituted the underworld were made out of the lower part of the body, and the seven lokas that constituted the upper region were made out of the upper half of the body. This Vishwarupa extends throughout the universe. It even extends beyond the universe. Nothing that is created is independent of this great being. Brahma himself emerged from a lotus that sprouted from this great being's navel. If Brahma became the creator of all living beings, it was only because of the blessings of Vishnu. And Shiva happened to be the destroyer, also by Vishnu's grace. In every cycle, kalpa, Vishnu first creates himself, then he creates the other beings, preserves them, and eventually destroys them. Uddhava and Vidura. Many years ago, Vidura was once forced to leave his house. If you have read the Mahabharata, you will remember that Vidura was the younger brother of Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhana was always trying to bring some harm to the Pandavas. He tried to burn them in the house of Lak, Jatukriha. He unfairly defeated Yudhishthira in a game of dice, and he deprived the Pandavas of the kingdom that was rightfully theirs. Dhritarashtra was so smitten by the love of his son that he never interfered, even though he realized that what Duryodhana was doing was not quite right. Eventually, Vidura could bear it no longer. He begged Dhritarashtra to forsake his son and return the kingdom to Yudhishthira. Hearing this, Duryodhana lost his temper. Who has permitted this son of a slave girl to enter the court premises? He demanded to know. How dare Vidura insult the hands that feeds him? He behaves like an enemy. Banish him from the kingdom. It was indeed true that Vidura was the son of the slave girl, but that does not mean that Duryodhana had the right to insult someone who was his uncle. Vidura felt so hurt that he resolved to leave Hastinapur. Having left the capital, Vidura visited many places of pilgrimage. He traveled throughout the length and breadth of Bharatavarsha and finally came to the river Yamuna. On the banks of Yamuna, he met Uddhava. Uddhava was Krishna's close companion and friend, and Vidura was delighted to have met him. He inquired from Uddhava about the welfare of Krishna and other Yadavas. At this, Uddhava remembered various childhood exploits of Krishna's. Krishna's childhood. Uddhava had first met Krishna when he was only 5 years of age, but even at that early age, he had become a close friend of Krishna's and could not bear to be parted from him. And together, the two friends have aged over the years. Now, when Vidura asked him about Krishna, Uddhava's eyes glistened with tears. He said, I am sorry to tell you that the days of Krishna's glory are now over. Cursed are the Yadavas for not recognizing while there was time that Krishna was Vishnu's avatara. They treated him like a mere human. There are only a few like you and me who recognize Krishna for what he was. Alas, Krishna is no more. He is dead. The world no longer seems to be the same. Do you remember his childhood deeds? The world was full of evil, and Brahma went and prayed to Vishnu that something might be done about all this evil. Vishnu agreed to be born as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. But Kamsa and the king of Yadavas had got to know that Vasudeva's son would kill him, so he imprisoned Vasudeva and Devaki. It was in Kamsa's prison that Krishna was born. To save the newly born baby from Kamsa's wrath, Vasudeva went and left baby Krishna with Nanda and his wife Yashoda. There, Krishna was brought up as the son of Nanda and Yashoda. Krishna's elder brother was Baladeva, also born as an incarnation of Vishnu's. For 11 years, the two brothers withheld from common knowledge their divine nature. They played with the cowherds along the banks of the river Yamuna and tended to the cattle. Krishna was particularly fond of playing the flute. Kamsa had got to know about Krishna and he sent many demons to try and kill Krishna. But Krishna disposed of all these demons effortlessly. There was a huge snake named Kaliya, which was poisoning the water of the Yamuna. Cowherds and cattle died as a result of drinking this poisoned water. Krishna tamed Kaliya and made the water of the Yamuna pure again. He also brought back the life of the cowherds and the cattle who had died. The cowherds have been in the habit of praying to Indra through a sacrificial ceremony. Krishna put a stop to this sacrifice. This so angered Indra that he poured down torrents and torrents of rain and threatened to destroy all the cowherds and their cattle. But Krishna lifted up a huge mountain known as Govardhana with his finger. He held this aloft and all the mountains and the cattle took shelter under this mountain. They were thus saved. Kamsa's death. Later on, Krishna came to Mathura. This city was Kamsa's capital. He killed Kamsa and made Kamsa's father Ugrasena the king of Yadavas. He also freed his parents Vasudeva and Devaki from Kamsa's prison. Those who were devoted to Krishna attained true knowledge, and Uddhava asked Vidura to worship the sage Maitreya if he desired to attain this knowledge. Maitreya. The sage Maitreya lived in Haridwara, and it was there that Vidura met him. Vidura asked Maitreya, "Our worldly life is such that no matter what one does, there is unhappiness all around. Tell me how Krishna can be worshipped so that one can conquer all this unhappiness." Maitreya told Vidura from the beginning of creation, Brahma emerged from Vishnu's navel and began the task of creation. From the powers of his mind, he created four sages whose names were Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, Sanatkumara. But these sages did not seem to be at all interested in the process of creation, and this made Brahma very angry. From his furrowed brows there were born a son known Nilalohita, so named because he was partly blue, Nila, and partly red, Lohita, in color. Nilalohita was the ancestors of all the gods. As soon as he was born, Nilalohita began to cry. "Why are you crying?" asked Brahma. "Because I have no name," replied the boy. "Give me a name and tell me where I should stay." Brahma told the boy not to cry. From the word crying, Rud, he named the boy Rudra. In addition, Brahma gave the boy 11 more names. These were Manu, Manu, Mahinas, Mahan, Shiva, Rita, Dhyaja, Ugrareta, Bhava, Kala, Vamadeva, and Dhritarvrata. 11 wives named Dhi, Dhriti, Rasala, Uma, Nisut, Sarpi, Ila, Ambika, Iravati, Swadha, and Diksha were earmarked for Rudra. Brahma also decided that Rudra's habitat would be the heart, the life, the sky, the air, the fire, the water, the earth, the sun, the moon, and all meditation. Brahma next asked Rudra to create more beings. The first Rudra created several other Rudras, but all these creations were terrible, and they proceeded to destroy whatever Brahma had so far created. Brahma told Rudra, "Please desist. Enough is enough. There is no need for you to create anything anymore. Why don't you go away and meditate?" Thus, Thus instructed by Brahma, Rudra went away to meditate, and with Rudra safely out of the way, Brahma could concentrate on the act of creation once more. 10 sons were born to Brahma. Their names were Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Bhrigu, Vasistha, Daksha, and Narada. Narada was born from Brahma's lap, Daksha from his thumb, Vasistha from his breath of life, Bhrigu from his skin, Kratu from his hands, Pulaha from his navel, Pulastya from his ears, Angira from his mouth, Atri from his eyes, and Marichi from his mind. Several sacred texts came out of Brahma's mouth. This included the four Vedas, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva. Ayurveda, the art of medicine. Dhanurveda, the art of fighting. Gandharveda, the art of singing. The Puranas also came out of Brahma's mouth, and they came to be known as the fifth Veda. Finally, Brahma split his own body into two. One part became male, the other female. The man was called Swayambhuva Manu, and the woman Satrurupa. Manu and Satrurupa had 5 children, 2 sons and 3 daughters. The sons were Priyavrata and Uttanapada, and the daughters were Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. The Boar Incarnation. Maitreya continued with the story. Manu and Sattarupa touched Brahma's feet. Lord, we have no place to live in. They said, the whole world is full of water. The earth is submerged in water. Brahma found that this was indeed true, and he wondered what might be done. Perhaps he should pray to Vishnu for deliverance. But while Brahma was thinking, a minute little boar came out from his nose. Within seconds, the boar grew and grew until it became as huge as an elephant. Brahma, the sages, and Manu marveled to see this wonderful sight. What could this boar be? As they wondered, the boar began to roar. The world shook with the sound of his roaring, and everyone realized that the boar could none other than Vishnu. They started to pray to Vishnu. They chanted mantras, incantations, so that the boar might be pacified. The boar leaped up into the sky. It hardened its body, and the hair on its neck stood up. It struck the clouds with its hooves. The light from its eyes lit up the 4 directions, and its tusks glistened white. Glancing at the people who had assembled, the boar entered the water of the ocean. Like a mountain, the boar's body fell, and the bed of the ocean was ripped apart. The waves rose up as if in protest. The boar went all the way down into the underworld, and there it discovered the earth. It raised the earth with its tusk and brought the earth up to where it should be. In the water there was also a Daitya demon named Hiranya, Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha tried to fight the boar with a mace but was no match for Vishnu. Vishnu killed the demon with his Sudarsana Chakra, a weapon like a bladed discus. The sages prayed at this wondrous deed, but Vidura was not satisfied. Sage Maitreya, he said, you have been too brief. Who was this Hiranyakashiya who met Vishnu in the underworld? Maitreya then began to relate the story of Hiranyakashiya. Daksha's daughter Diti was married to the sage Kashyapa, Kashyapa himself being the son of the sage Marichi. Dashyapa and Diti had 2 sons. Unfortunately, deity had had the idea of having children when it was evening. The evening is not auspicious for such a task since it is then that ghosts and demons wandered around. The upshot was that the two sons who were born were destined to be evil. They would oppress the world, and it was only destined that they would be killed by Vishnu in two of his incarnations. These two sons were Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. But Kashyapa was a powerful sage, so he granted his wife the boon that one of their grandson would be so righteous that he would be a model for everyone to follow. The grandson was Prahalada, who was always devoted to Vishnu. For 100 years, the two evil sons stayed in Diti's womb without being born. So evil were they that even before they were born, the four directions became dark, and the sun and the moon faded. The gods were greatly alarmed at these developments and went to Brahma for a solution. Brahma said, "Do not worry, all this has been ordained. Let me tell you about Jaya and Vijaya." Once upon a time, several sages went to Vaikundha Loka. This was the place where Vishnu lay. Vaikundha Loka was a beautiful place to behold. It was full of wonderful garden. The garden had miraculous trees which yielded whatever fruits and flowers one desired. The ponds were full of flowers. The Gandharvas, singers of heavens, and Apsaras, dancers of heaven, were everywhere. All those who were devoted to Vishnu stayed in Vaikuntha Loka. The evil can never go there. Vaikuntha Loka is a better place than even Brahma Loka, Brahma's residence. The sages were very happy to The sages were very happy to have come to Vaikundha Loka. They now desired to see Vishnu himself. They crossed 6 gates without difficulty and so arrived at the seventh, the last gate they would have crossed before meeting Vishnu. But there were two sentries who stood guard at the seventh gate and they would not let the sages pass. They had maces in their hands and they threatened the sages with their weapons. The sages felt insulted. They therefore cursed the two sentries that they would leave Vaikundha Loka and be born on earth. These two sentries were named Jaya and Vijaya, and it was Jaya and Vijaya who were born as the two asuras, demons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. After the babies had spent 100 years in Diti's womb, they were born as a pair of twins. When they were born, there were ill omens all around. The earth shook and fire broke out everywhere. There were showers of meteors and thunders and comets. Terrible dust storms darkened the earth. Trees were uprooted in the storms and lightning split the sky. The clouds were so thick that the sun's rays could not be seen. There were tidal waves in the sea. Donkeys brayed and owls hooted. The elder of the twins was named Hiranyaksha and the younger Hiranyakashipu. They became very powerful and strong. Hiranyaksha once arrived in heaven. He had become invincible thanks to a boon received from Brahma. He defeated Indra and other gods and expelled them from heaven. Having conquered heaven, Hiranyaksha decided to conquer the sea. The god of the ocean was Varuna, and Varuna's army was no match for Hiranyaksha. Varuna's palace was named Bivavari. Hiranyaksha won over Bivavari and began to live there. After some time, Hiranyaksha encountered Vishnu in the form of a boar in the water. He challenged the boar to a duel and hurled a mace at it, but Vishnu easily repelled the mace and he struck Hiranyaksha with his own mace. Thus they continued to fight for some time, striking each other with maces. Vishnu struck the asura with his throat with the mace, but this did not affect Hiranyaksha. He counterattacked so hard that Vishnu's mace fell off from his hand. At this, Vishnu called for his Sudarsana Chakra. He repelled the various maces and spears that the Asura hurled at him. Hiranyaksha now restored to Maya the art of creating illusions and hallucinations. He completely disappeared and made the whole world dark, and from that darkness he began to fling down boulders and weapons. There seemed to be demons everywhere, but when Vishnu flung his chakra, all this Maya disappeared and the chakra sliced off Hiranyaksha's head. Having achieved his purpose, Vishnu gave up the form of a boar. Kardama and Devahuti, one of Swayambhuva's Manu's daughter was Devahuti. She was married to the sage Kardama. For 10,000 years, Kardama performed very difficult tapasya, meditation on the banks of river Saraswati. This meditation so pleased Vishnu that he granted Kardama the boon that he himself would be born as the son of Kardama and Devahuti. But a special place needed to be designed for Vishnu to be born. With the power of his tapasya, Kardama created a Vimana, a space vehicle. This Vimana was bejeweled and richly decorated. It had many rooms inside it. For 100 years, Kardama and Devahuti lived in this Vimana, and Devahuti gave birth to 9 daughters. Their names were Kala, Anasuya, Shraddha, Havirbu, Gati, Kriya, Khyati, Arundhati, and Shanti. These 9 daughters were married to 9 great sages: Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Bhrigu, Vahistha, and Atharva. Thereafter, Vishnu himself was born to Kardama and Devahuti as Kapila. His purpose was to teach men the intricacies of Samkhya Tattva, the theory of true knowledge that showed the path to an union with the Brahman. After Kapila was born, Kardama went off on a pilgrimage and Kapila was brought up by Devahuti. They lived in an ashrama hermitage named Bindusarovara. Once Devahuti went to his son and said, I am tired of this world, I am tired of its illusions, teach me true knowledge. Kapila taught his mother, and these teachings have come to be known as Samkhya Yoga. Yoga means union and is used in the sense of the human soul, Atman, uniting with the divine essence, Brahman. This is what Kapila taught. Yoga conquers both happiness and unhappiness. The mind gets attached to material pursuits, and this is the main obstacle in the path of yoga. One has to free oneself from this attachment. This also requires the overcoming of one's own ego. The main path to achieving this union with God is bhakti, devotion, and faith. The Brahman has no traits, it cannot be described, it is not moved by any emotion. Those who do not realize the identity of the Atman with the Brahman are destined to be born again and again. The supreme knowledge that Kapila taught her freed Devahuti from all here illusions. She realized that the body was nothing. True bliss was in yoga. She went to an ashrama on the banks of the river Saraswati and there began to practice yoga. She meditated on the various forms of Lord Vishnu that Kapila had told her of. The place where Devahuti performed tapasya has now become a famous place of pilgrimage. It is known as Siddhipada, the daughters of Manu. You will recollect that Syambhuva Manu had three daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. You have already heard Devahuti's story. Akuti was married to the sage Ruchi and they had a son and a daughter. The son was Vishnu's incarnation and was brought up by Vyayambhuva Manu. The daughter was named Dakshina. Dakshina married Vishnu himself and their 12 sons were the gods known as Tusitas. Brahma's son was Daksha and Daksha married Prasuti. They had 16 daughters. 13 of these daughters were married to the god Dharma, one to the god Agni, one to the ancestors, and the last one to Shiva. One of Dharma's wives was Murti, and she gave birth to the two great sages Nara and Narayana. Nara and Narayana were incarnations of Vishnu's. They were worshipped by everyone and went off to perform tapasya on Mount Gandhamadana. You have been told that Shiva married one of Daksha's daughter. Her name was Sati. She gave up her life because her husband was insulted. Thereby hangs a tale. Shiva and Daksha. Many years ago, there was a yagna sacrifice at which all the gods and sages were assembled. All the guests were seated when Daksha suddenly arrived. Everyone stood up to honor Daksha except Brahma and Shiva. Brahma had no reason to show Daksha respect. Daksha was, after all, his own son. But Daksha was greatly insulted at Shiva ignoring him. Apart from anything else, Shiva was also happened to be his son-in-law. Assembled guests, said Daksha, please listen to what I have to say. This Shiva has no sense of shame. He does not know how to honor his senior. He is married to my daughter Sati. Wouldn't it be proper for of him to stand up and show me respect? It was stupid of me to marry my daughter to this useless fellow. His companions are ghosts and demons. He frequents cremation grounds, samsana, like a lunatic. His body is smeared with ashes from dead bodies. He wears a garland of skulls and he drinks all the time. Shiva continued to ignore Daksha and did not react to these angry words, but Daksha's ire had been roused and he cursed Shiva that henceforth Shiva would not be entitled to receive any offerings that were made to gods at yagnas. He then left the place in a huff. Shiva's main companion was Nandi. Nandi was incensed that Shiva had been cursed and that the sages and the brahmanas should have kept quiet and not protested. Nandi therefore cursed the sages and brahmanas that they would be born again and again on earth. They would have to work for a living and they would lose sight of true knowledge and become addicted to material pursuit. Now it was the turn of the sage Bhrigu to get angry. He cursed all followers of Shiva that they would become addicted to drinking and would roam around with bodies smeared with ashes and decorated with skulls. Their hairs would always be matted. Shiva had been silent through all the pandemonium, but at this general cursing, he collected his followers and companions and left the yagna. The yagna was performed in Shiva's absence. This went on for 1,000 years. Days passed. Daksha organized another yagna named Vajapiya and did not invite Shiva or his followers. The yagna was successfully completed, and this made Daksha so arrogant that he decided to hold yet another yagna named Brihaspati Stava. He invited all the other gods and sages to his yagna but did not invite Shiva and his followers. The sacrifice was a tremendous success, and the people talked about it everywhere. Some such people who had been to the yagna were conversing about it while traveling through the sky. Sati overheard their conversation. She also saw many Gandharva women going to attend the yagna in their vimanas. This excited Sati's curiosity, and she too wanted to go to her father's sacrifice. She went to Shiva and said, "Your father-in-law Daksha is organizing a wonderful sacrifice. Let us go there. All the other gods are going. I'll get to meet my sister. I have not met them for such a long time, nor have I met my mother for ages. This is a chance to talk to all one's relative. Let us go, or at least let me go. I know that we have not received an invitation, but does one need an invitation to go to one's husband, father, or friends?" Shiva reminded Sati of what Daksha had said earlier and asked her to desist. She would not be welcome there, for although she was Daksha's own daughter, she happened to be Shiva's wife as well. But despite Shiva's warning, Sati was adamant she would go. So he sent several of his companions to accompany her. Sati arrived at Daksha's sacrifice and found that the yagna had started. The gods and the sages had arrived. The Vedas were being recited, but except for Sati's mother and sisters, no one dared to welcome her. Her father ignored her completely. She also noticed that at the yagna no provision has been made for Shiva's share. Shiva was to be deprived. Sati told her father, "I had not expected that you would stoop to such low level. Who but you would have insulted a person like Shiva? It is the duty of a Pativrata, a woman who is devoted to her husband, to protest if her husband is being insulted. You have insulted my husband. I owe this body of mine to you. Since you happen to be my father, I no longer wish to possess a body that is thus contaminated." Saying this, Sati sat down on the floor. She controlled her breath and brought the breath of her life to the center of her forehead. She thought of Shiva and exhaled the breath of life, and her body was immediately consumed by fire. The assembled guests marveled at this wonderful incident. Shiva had sent several companions with Sati. These companions now attacked Daksha and the guests, but among the guests was the powerful sage Bhrigu. With this power, Bhrigu created thousands and thousands of gods named Ribhus from the fire of the Yagna. The Ribhus soon put all Shiva's companions to fight. These companions rushed back to Shiva and told him what had transpired. Shiva's anger knew no bound. He tore off a flaming hair from his head and flung it down on the ground with a thunderous laugh. From the hair was created gigantic being named Virabhadra. Virabhadra's head torched the sky. He was as dark as the clouds, and he had 1,000 arms and 3 eyes. A garland of skulls hung around his neck, and his hands held diverse weapons. Virabhadra stood before Shiva in all humility and asked, "What are my orders?" Shiva replied, "I have given birth to you and you are invincible. Go and destroy Daksha and his yagna." Virabhadra took up a terrible Trishula trident and rushed towards the place where the sacrifice was being held. He was accompanied by several other demons and ghosts. Some of them broke down the pillars of Daksha's house. Others demolish the sacrificial pyre. The fire of the yagna was put out. Some demons chased the sages, and the gods were attacked by other. One of Shiva's companions was named Mana. He caught hold of the sage Bhrigu and tied him up. The gods who did not flee were also tied up. Virabhadra himself imprisoned Daksha. He tore off Bhigu's head and then he tried to slice off Daksha's head with his sword, but he found that this was very difficult to do. So Virabhadra dragged Daksha's body to a scaffold that had been erected for sacrificing animals. He placed Daksha's head on the scaffold and cut it off with his sword. This severed head was flung into the fire. Having accomplished his purpose, Virabhadra returned to Shiva's residence in Mount Kailasa. The gods fled in despair to Brahma and told him what had happened. Brahma's reaction was that gods has got what they deserve. They have no business to insult Shiva and to be a party to such insults. Shiva was entitled to shares in all yagnas just as the other gods were. Brahma therefore advised the gods to pray to Shiva. No one else could pacify Shiva's anger. The gods went to Kailasa and began to pray to Shiva. They desired that Daksha might be brought back to life, Bhrigu's beard might sprout again, and the gods who had been injured might quickly be restored to good health. Shiva had cooled down by then, so that he was not averse to granting these boons. But what was to be done about Daksha? His whole head had been consumed by the fire. Shiva proposed that solution, that the head of goat might be struck into Daksha's body. The gods and sages returned to Shiva to the place where the sacrifice has been held. Shiva struck the goat's head into Daksha's body and Daksha was brought back to life. He begged Shiva for mercy and forgiveness. The yagna started afresh and this time Vishnu himself acted as the chief priest. As for Sati, she was born again as the daughter of the Himalaya and Menaka and united again with Shiva, but that is a different story. Dhruva. Vyayambhuva Manu had two sons named Priyavrata and Uttanapada. Both of them became kings. King Uttanapada had two wives, Suniti and Suruchi. He was extremely fond of Suruchi but did not like Suniti all that much. Suruchi's son was Uttama and Suniti's son was Dhruva. One day Uttama was sitting on his father's lap and being fondled by him. Dhruva came there and also wanted to sit on father's lap, but Suruchi said, "What do you think you're doing? The king's lap and his throne are reserved for my son. You are not my son. Go away. Go to your mother Suniti." Dhruva burst into tears at this harsh word, and so enamored was the king of Suruchi that he did not protest. The weeping Dhruva went to his own mother and was consoled by her. Suniti said, "Son, do not be unhappy. If Suruchi had sinned, she will have to pay for her sin in the future. Unfortunate am I, the king does not love me, and unfortunate are you that you are my son. We must be paying for the sins that we have committed earlier. Do not be sad. Pray to God. There lies true salvation." Dhruva resolved to do this and left his father's house. He was accosted by the sage Narada, who told him that he was too small to be performing difficult tapasya. that was meant for the sages, but Dhruva was insistent. Through his tapasya, he wished to attain a position that had not been attained by any of his ancestors. This resolve pleased Narada no end. Narada advised Dhruva to go to the banks of the Yamuna to a grove named Madhuvana. He should there pray to Vishnu. Narada also taught Dhruva an incantation that he could use for this purpose. At this time, Dhruva was only 5 years of age. Dhruva began his tapasya. For the first month, he ate only fruit once every 3 days. The remaining days he fasted. In the second month, he ate once every 5 days, once every 9 days in the third month, and he lived only on air in the fourth month. Thus, 5 months passed. Dhruva stood there with one leg praying. He saw nothing but Vishnu everywhere. Eventually, Vishnu was pleased and appeared before Dhruva. When Vishnu offered to grant a boon, Dhruva desired that he might attain a position that no one had reached even before. Vishnu carved out a place for Dhruva in the sky. No one had lived there before. This would be known as Dhruva Loka. Dhruva would become the pole star. All the other stars would revolve around him. Dhruva Loka would not be destroyed at the end of a kalpa cycle, when everything else was destroyed. But all this would happen only after Dhruva died. For the moment Vishnu informed him that he should return to his father, for Dhruva was destined to rule as a king for 36,000 years. His brother Uttama would get lost while on a hunting expedition. Thanking Vishnu, Dhruva returned to his father's kingdom. King Uttanapada was very happy to have him back, and Uttama and Dhruva embraced each other. The two princes grew up together, and when Uttanapada desired to retire to the forest, he handed over the kingdom to Dhruva. Dhruva has two wives, Brahmi and Ila. Uttama never married. He went on a hunt and was killed by a powerful yaksha in the forest. These yakshas were beings who were the companions of Kubera, the god of wealth. Uttama's mother Suruchi went to look for her son in the forest and died there. When Dhruva learned that his brother had been killed by a yaksha, he was furious. He climbed onto his chariot and left for the abode of the yakshas to avenge his brother. The yakshas lived towards the north in a valley in the Himalayas. Dhruva found their city and started to blow on his conch shell, challenging the yakshas to a fight. The yaksha soldiers attacked, but Dhruva pierced them with his arrows. The yakshas brought millions of soldiers to bear on Dhruva, and the king was completely surrounded by his enemies, but he triumphed over them and killed many of them with his weapons. The yakshas retaliated with the use of Maya, the art of creating illusions. Dhruva repelled the Maya with a divine weapon known as Narayanastra. Before the fight could progress further, several sages came to Dhruva. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? They asked. Why are you killing innocent yakshas? This is a sin. Control your anger. Only one yaksha had killed your brother. Punish him, but why kill the others? Besides, everyone's destiny is ordained by Vishnu. He alone decides on what is to happen. Your brother was destined to die. Why blame the poor yaksha? He was only the instrument. Dhruva realized the wisdom in these words and ceased to fight. Kubera himself came to Dhruva and offered to grant him a boon. Dhruva wanted the boon that he might always remain devoted to Vishnu. The boon was granted and Dhruva returned to his kingdom. He ruled well and performed many sacrifices. He ruled for 36,000 years. When he was tired of the material life, Dhruva handed over the kingdom to his sons. He retired to a hermitage named Badrikashrama to perform yoga. After some time has passed, a Vimana descended from the sky for Dhruva. Vishnu's companions Nanda and Sunanda were in the Vimana. They took Dhruva to the place where they had reserved for him in the sky. If you look up at the sky at night, you will be able to see Dhruva. Vena and Prithu. Dhruva has a son named Utkala who was asking to become king after Dhruva left for the forest, but Utkala was not interested in becoming a king. He was more concerned about getting to know about the Brahman. So the kingdom was handed over to his younger brother Vatsara. Vatsara's descendant was King Vena. Vena was terrible even as a prince. It was really Vena's acts that drove Vena's father Anga to the forest. In fact, King Anga had arranged for an Aswamedha Yagya horse sacrifice. Anga sent several priests with invitations for the gods, but these invitations notwithstanding, the gods did not come to attend the sacrifice. Anga was puzzled. Had he committed a sin that the gods had refused to come? He was then told that the gods had not come because Anga did not yet have a son. It was imperative that Anga perform a yagna so as to obtain a son. Anga did as he was told. He performed a sacrifice and was given some rice pudding that his wife should have if they desired a son. Anga's wife Sunita had the rice pudding and gave birth to a son. This son was Vena. Sunita's father was Mitru was an evil person, but ever since an early age, Vena got attached to his maternal grandfather and picked up evil pursuits from him. He would go to the forest, unnecessarily kill deer. He killed those who came to play with him. Things came to such a pass that people used to run away when they saw Vena coming. Anga tried to discipline his son, but to no avail. Vena was beyond all control. In sheer desperation, Anga left the kingdom one night and left for the forest. No further trace could be found of him. A kingdom cannot function without a king. Vena was crowned the king, although the subjects were not at all keen that Vena should become the king. They had no choice in the matter. When he became the king, Vena's oppression knew no bounds. He stopped all yagnas in his kingdom. The sages realizes that they had made a mistake. They had crowned Vena king to prevent the anarchy that would have happened had there been no king, but what was happening was worse than anarchy. The sages went to Vena to try and persuade him to mend his ways, but Vena would have none of it. He would not permit yagnas. Yagnas were meant for the gods, but what need was there of gods when the people could pray to King Vena himself? Having realized that Vena was beyond redemption, the sages resolved to kill him. This they did with the power of their anger, but Vena had left no son. Who was to become king in his place? In the absence of a king, the kingdom degenerates. In the brief period when there was no king, there were ill omens all around, and thievings took over the kingdom since there was no protector of the people. Vena's dead body had been preserved by his mother. The sages went on to the dead body and began to knead it. As a result of the kneading, a dwarf emerged from the dead king's thighs. The dwarf was dark and his eyes were red. The dwarf asked, "What shall I do?" "Sit," replied the sages. The word Nisida means sit, and so the dwarf came to be known as Nisida. The evil trait of Vena had entered the dwarf's body, so the dwarf and his descendants were not permitted to live inside the kingdom. They lived in the forest and became hunters. The sages continued to knead the dead bodies. Arm and a son and a daughter emerged. The sages were now content, for they realized that the son Prithu was an incarnation of Vishnu and the daughter Archi was an incarnation of the goddess Lakshmi. Prithu married Archi and was crowned king. Prithu was a good king, but at that time there was no food grains available on earth and people were starving. They went to Prithu and said, "Save us, the earth has swallowed and the seeds of all food grains and herbs and crops do not grow. Please do something to prevent the famine." Prithu fixed an arrow to his bow and decided to let it loose at the earth, but the earth started to run away and Prithu followed after her with the arrow in his bow. The earth could not outdistance Prithu. Finally, she said, "Please do not destroy me. If I am destroyed, where will you and your subjects live? I will grant whatever it is that you wish for." Prithu asked her to restore the food grains and the herbs. The earth adopted the form of a cow and Prithu milked from her the food grains and the herbs. It is after Prithu that the earth is known as Prithvi. Prithu resolved to conduct 100 Asvamedha yagnas. This disturbed Indra, the king of gods. Indra had himself performed 100 Asvamedha yagnas and thus obtained for himself the title of Satakratu. Now Prithu was about to equal his glory. Indra became jealous. A horse is an essential component of the sacrifice. When no one was noticing, Indra stole the sacrificial horse. This was noticed by the sage Atri and he pointed it out to Prithu's son. Prithu's son chased Indra and brought the horse back. But Indra stole the horse yet again and yet again Prithu's son brought it back. Prithu was greatly angered at the disturbance that Indra was causing and decided to kill Indra. Brahma, however, convinced Prithu that the killing of Indra was not advisable. Indra was, after all, the kings of God. Prithu had already successfully completed 99 Asvamedha yagnas, and how did it matter whether the 101 was completed or not? Posterity would remember Prithu as a far greater people than Indra. Prithu listened to Brahma and became friends with Indra. Prithu was given advice by 4 Brahma rishis, sages. He ruled according to this advice, and after many years he handed over the kingdom to his son and went to the forest to do tapasya. When he died, he was taken to Vishnu Loka or Vaikunda Loka, the abode of Vishnu. Prithu's wife Archi immolated herself on her husband's funeral pyre and was also taken to Vishnu Loka. The Prachetas and Puranjana. Amongst Prithu's descendants, there was a king named Prachinavarhi. This king had 10 sons who were known as the Prachetas. Once the Prachetas were journeyed westward to perform tapasya inside the ocean. On their way, they came to a huge lake. Fishes were playing in the water and many lotuses were bloomed on the lake. Musical instruments were being played on the shore of the lake. The Prachetas were amazed to find that Shiva and his companions were bathing in the lake. Shiva gave the Prachetas a lot of good advice and the Prachetas spent 10,000 years under the water performing tapasya. Meanwhile, Narada came to visit King Prachinavarhi. The king worshipped Narada and said, "I am too attached to worldly pursuit. Give me some advice so that I may be freed of these illusions." "I will tell you the story of Puranjana," replied Narada. "There used to be a king named Puranjana. He had only one friend and no one knew what the friend's name was. Puranjana was looking for a place where he might live on earth, but no place that he saw appealed to him. His searches for a proper residence eventually brought him to the foot of the Himalayas, and there he discovered a beautiful city. The city was full of groves and houses. It had moats and walls around it. The houses were bright with jewels, and the doors and windows were made of gold and silver. Wild beasts roamed inside the city, but they had forgotten their cruel nature. In the city, Puranjana discovered a beautiful woman guarded by 10 bodyguards. A snake with 5 hoods also protected her. "Who are you?" asked Puranjana, "and who are these 10 guards and the snake who follow you around?" Puranjana wanted to marry the woman, and the woman readily agreed. She said that Puranjana could live in the city for 100 years and be her husband. Puranjana married the woman and forgot about everything else. He did not go on hunts, lest his wife be offended. He forgot all sense of night and day. He had 1100 sons and 110 daughters. But slowly Puranjana grew old. The pleasures that he had earlier enjoyed no longer appealed to him, and his own kingdom, Panchala, had been conquered by his enemies. When the king died, he was taken to hell and spent 100 years there. While he was in hell, he thought about his wife all the time, and since he kept thinking about a woman all the time, he was born as a woman in his next birth. Born as the daughter of the king of Vidarbha, he was married to King Malaya, Malayadvaja. They had 7 sons and 1 daughter. King Malayadvaja ruled for a long time and then handed over the kingdom to his son. He went to meditate in the forest, and his wife accompanied him for 100 years. Malaya Teja meditated, and then he died, and his wife was struck with grief. She decided that she would immolate herself on her husband's funeral pyre, but just as she was about to do so, a Brahmana arrived on the scene. "What are you doing?" asked the Brahmana. "Who are you sorrowing for? Who is this man to you? For that matter, who are you? Don't you recognize me? I am your friend from your earlier life. When you were Puranjana, you had gone off to a city in the Himalayas and had forgotten all about me. Forget material pursuit and realize true knowledge. You are neither Puranjana nor are you Malaya Dhaja's wife. You are your Atman. Understand this and be free of all illusion." Prachinvarni understood the message, that this was latent in Narada's story. He went to the sage Kapila's hermitage to meditate. Meanwhile, his sons, the Prachetas, had succeeded in their tapasya. Vishnu had appeared before them. They married a woman named Marisha and had many children. Priyavrata and his descendants. Priyavrata had no real desire to be king. He was not interested in worldly matter, but his father Swayambhuva Manu, his teacher Brahma, and the sage Narada convinced him that there was nothing wrong in becoming a king. This did not necessarily mean that the one would get tied down by the illusions of the world, so Priyavrata did become king. He married Vasishtmati. The sun goes around the world in his chariot. When the sun is on the other side of the world, it is night. But Priyavrata was quite upset that night should occur. Why should it not always be day? One night he decided that he would drive his flaming chariot around the world so that the night might disappear. And when the king was doing that, he looked like a second sun. 7 times he drove his chariot around Mount Sumeru. The wheel of his chariot gorged the earth and created the 7 oceans. These 7 oceans surrounded the 7 regions, Dipyas of the earth. The name of these Dipyas are Jambu, Plaksha, Salmali, Kusha, Krauncha, Shaka, and Puskara. These 7 Dipas Priyavrata left to his 7 sons, Agnidra, Ida, Ziva, Yasna, Bahu, Hiranya, Grita, Pristha, Medatithi, Viti, Hotra. Agnidra ruled over Jambu Dwepa. Agniha had no sons. He went to Mount Mandhara and started to pray to Brahma that he might have a son. Brahma knew that Agnidra wanted, and so he sent an Apsara named Purvachitti to Agnidra. She was so beautiful that Agnidra's meditation was disturbed. "Who are you?" he asked. "Are you an illusion? If you are not, please marry me." Purvachitti married Agnidra, and they had 9 sons, whose names were Nabhi, Kimpurusha, Harivarsha, Ilavrita, Ramyaka, Kuru, Hiranmaya, Bhadraspya, and Ketumala. After Agnidra died, the 9 sons split up Jambudvipa into 9 different regions, Varshas. Each ruled over one region, and the region took on the name of its ruler. Nabi's son was Rishabha. Rishabha was devoted to Vishnu. He married Indra's daughter Jayanti, and they had 100 sons. The eldest was called Bharata, and it was after him that this land came to be known as Bharatvarsha. Rishabha gave his son a lot of learned advice so that they might not get bogged down by the illusions of the world. When Rishabha died, Bharata became king. Bharata's queen was named Panchajani. Bharata ruled well. He performed many yagnas. When he had ruled for many years, he handed over the kingdom to his sons and became a hermit. He lived alone in an ashrama on the banks of the river Gandaki and prayed to Vishnu for enlightenment. One day a deer came to drink water from the river. Just as the deer was drinking water, a lion rode nearby, and the deer was frightened. She jumped into the water of the river and delivered a baby there. The baby deer was carried by the current of the river, and the mother deer managed to clamber up on the bank, but died of fright and exhaustion. Bharata saw what had happened. He jumped into the water, rescued the baby deer. He brought it home to his hermitage and began to rear it. Slowly he got attached to the deer, so much so he forgot all about his meditation. He would start to worry if he did not see the deer for a while. Had it been attacked by a jackal or some other wild beast, even when he died, he kept thinking of the deer. Since he had been thinking of a deer at the time of the death, Bharata was born as a deer in his next life, but he was born as Jatismara, that is, he could remember the incident of his earlier life. He realized that he had been dislodged from the path of yoga through his own mistakes. He therefore came back to his earlier ashrama and lived there. When the deer died, Bharata was reborn as the son of a Brahmana. As a Brahmana, Bharata continued to be a Jatismara. He realized that human relationships were transient and did not wish to get attached to them. He pretended to be mad, stupid, deaf, and dumb so that no one might mix with him. When Bharata's parents died, his brother began to treat him rather shabbily. They gave him the worst of food to eat, but Bharata could not care less. He ate only to survive, not to satisfy his senses. He was strong of health and slept on the ground. A piece of cloth sufficed as the clothing for him, and he never bathed. Other people started to treat him as an outcast. There was a leader of the Sudras who wished to make a human sacrifice to the goddess Kali. He had captured a man for this purpose, but in the dead of the night the prisoner escaped. The Sudras had to find another person for the sacrifice, and they found Bharata sitting in a field. They captured him and brought him to their leader. Bharata was fed, bathed, and dressed in new clothes. The Sudra priests The Sudra priest then raised his sword to sacrifice Bharata to the goddess, but Kali could not bear this to take place. She came out of her image, and she and her companion killed all the Sudras. Bharata was nonchalant. He returned to his field. One day, King Rahu Gana was passing. He ruled over the kingdoms of Sindhu and Sauvira. The king was riding a palanquin, and the palanquin needed one more bearer. The king's servant found Bharata and brought him to the king. Bharata seemed to be strong and healthy enough. He was therefore made to bear the palanquin with the other bearers. But Bharata could not keep pace with the other bearer. He stepped very carefully so that he might not step on living beings such as insects and kill them. The result was that the palanquin did not move smoothly. This irritated the king, and when he scolded the bearer, they pointed out that it was Bharata who was responsible. Rahugana shouted at Bharata. Are you tired? He asked. Have you traveled a long distance, or is it that you are weak? You look strong enough to me. Bharata merely smiled. I am not tired, he replied, nor have I traveled a long distance. I am neither weak nor strong. I am my Atman. How can my Atman be tired, weak, or strong? How can it travel a long distance? The king was amazed at these words of wisdom. He fell down at Bharata's feet and begged that he might be forgiven. He wished to learn more words of wisdom from Bharata. Bharata taught Rahu Gana about the Brahman and told about the identity of Atman and the Brahman. He told the king that the physical body was only transitory, it was the Atman that was permanent. Life was like a forest with the dangers of illusions and material attachment everywhere. The learned knew how to step carefully so as to avoid this pitfall. Thus, it was that King Rahugana learned through knowledge from Bharata. Geography. You have already been told that the earth is divided into 7 regions: Dwapas, Jambu, Dwapa, and is shaped like the leaf of a lotus, and there are 9 regions: Varshas within Jambu Dwapa. Ilavita Varsha is in the center of the Mount Sumera, is right in the middle is the Ilavitra Varsha. On the peak of the Mount Sumera is Brahma's famous city, Bharatavarsa is the most sacred of the Varsas, hells. There are several different hells, Naraka. Each Naraka is earmarked for a specific sort of sin. All the hells are located below the underworld. Some people say that there are 28 different hells. It is Yama, the god of death, who decides which hell a sinner should go to. A thief goes to Tamisra Naraka and is made to suffer hunger and thirst there. A person who is violent is sent to Raurava. Raurava Naraka is populated by snake-like being known as Ruru. That is the reason why the Naraka is called Raurava. The Rurus practice violence on the sinner in proportion to the sins that he had committed on earth. A sinner who does harm to a Brahmana is sent to Kalasutra and burned there, and those who oppose the Vedas are taken to Asipatravana and whipped. Asi is a sword and Patra means a leaf. Asipatra is the blade of a sword. Vana means forest. Asipatra Vana Naraka is full of palm trees that has leaves as sharp as the blades of a sword. If one tries to run away from the whipping, one's flesh is torn to bits by the sharp leaves of the palm tree. Those who punish the innocent are sent to Sukara Mukha and bitten by bedbugs. Sinners who eat without offering food to God, Brahmanas or guests go to Krimi Bhoja and are eaten by the worms. An arsonist or a poisoner is torn to bits by 720 dogs. A bearer of false witness is flung down repeatedly from mountain tops. A Brahmana who drinks is forced to drink molten iron. A miser goes to Suchimukha. There, Yama's servant drive a needle and thread through his body. Those who perform good deeds go to Swarga. Each individual has an account of the store of merit, punya, and sins, papa, committed by him. Punya is rewarded in heaven and papa is to be paid for in hell. When the account of punya or papa is partly cleared, individuals are born again in order to clear any portion of punya papa that may remain. Ajamila. Ajamila. But without waiting for Naraka, a sinner can make atonement for his sins, prayaschitta. The best form of prayaschitta is to call upon Vishnu. That is, for example, the story of Ajamila. In the land of Kanya Gupsa, there lived a Brahmana named Ajamila. His wife was a woman of lowly caste and she persuaded Ajamila to perform all sorts of evil deeds. He gambled and cheated and stole. Ajamila lived for 80 years and he has 10 sons. The youngest was named Narayana and he was his father's darling. The time came to Ajamila to die. Three terrible messengers of Yama came to take Ajamila to Naraka. Their faces were fierce and they held nooses in their hands. Ajamila did not realize what was happening. He was still thinking of his youngest son and he called out Narayana, Narayana, but Narayana was also Vishnu's name. And at those words, Vishnu's servants appeared. A tussle began between Yama's messengers and Vishnu's servants. Yama's messenger wanted to take Ajamila to Naraka, but Vishnu's servants would not let them do this. They maintained that since Ajamila had called upon Narayana, Vishnu before his death, all his sin had been pardoned. Finally, both parties left and Ajamila was allowed to live for some more time. He had now become penitent for his deeds and he spent the remaining part of his life in performing tapasya. When he died, Vishnu's servant took him to Vishnu Loka. Indra and Vritra. Once upon a time, Indra was seated on his throne, and the other gods were all seated around him. The Gandharvas were singing, and Apsaras were dancing. The Guru, teacher of the Devas, gods, were Brihaspati. Brihaspati came to the assembly, but so engrossed was Indra in the singing and the dancing that he neglected to stand up and honor Brihaspati. At this, Brihaspati felt insulted and left the assembly. Indra immediately realized that had happened and decided to hunt out Brihaspati and beg forgiveness. When the Guru was not going to let Indra get away so easily, using his power of Maya, he simply vanished. Indra searched and searched but could not find Brihaspati. The Asuras had got to know that the Devas were now without a guru. They thought that this was the opportune moment to attack. With this Guru Sukracharya's permission, they attacked the gods and drove them away. The gods went running to Brahma. Brahma said, "All this has happened because you insulted your guru. You have become weak because you have no guru. You need a guru. Go and pray to the sage Vishwarupa, the son of the Vestya. He will find a way out." Now, the Vestya had married Rachana, who was a Daitya woman. So, Vishwarupa was the nephew of the Daityas demon, and it was inconceivable that he would help the Devas in their fight with the Asuras or Daityas. But when the Devas prayed to him, Vishwarupa could not refuse. He became the priest of the gods, and thanks to his advice, the gods succeeded in defeating the demons. The Vishwarupa had three heads. He used one for eating, the second for drinking wine, and the third for drinking the juice of the soma herbs. Indra was never very sure of Vishwarupa. He was, after all, related to the Daityas. He might be helping them secretly. When he got the chance, Indra cut off all the three of Vishwarupa's head. The severed head became three types of bird. Vyatsta was famous that Indra had killed Vishwarupa. He performed a yagna and wished that an enemy of Indra's might be born out of the flame. A terrible asura came out of the fire and rapidly began to grow. He was as dark as the mountain and his eyes burned like the midday sun. The asura held a trident in his hand. The earth shook when he rode and danced. His mouth was as huge as a cave, and when he opened his mouth, it seemed as if he would swallow up all the three worlds and everything that was in them. People began to flee. The giant Asura was known as Vritra. The gods came and attacked Vritra with many weapons, but he simply swallowed up the weapons. The gods didn't know what to do. They began to pray to Vishnu. Vishnu appeared before them and said, "Go to sage Dadiji. His body is strong and hard from many years of tapasya. Ask him for his body and he will not refuse. A weapon named Vajra will be made from Dadichi's bone, and Indra will kill Vritra with the Vajra. Dadichi did not refuse when the gods asked him for his body, for the mere physical body was nothing. It was the Atman that was everything. Vishwakarma, the architect of gods, fashioned the Vajra out of the sage born, and armed with Vajra, Indra climbed onto the elephant Airavata and attacked Vritra and other demons. The other gods also came out to help Indra, and a terrible war raged between the gods and the demons. The sky was littered with weapons which were being hurled around. There were so many arrows flying around there. There were so many arrows flying around that the sky could not be seen. The demons began to flee. Vritra tried to restrain them. Cowards, he said, why are you running away? Everyone who is born has to die. It is better to die a glorious death on the battlefield than die as a coward. Come back. But the Asura soldier did not listen. Vritra continued to fight alone. He crushed the gods under his feet. Indra hurled a mace at Vritra, but Vritra caught the mace in his hand and struck Indra's elephant Airavata on the head with the mace. The elephant retreated and started to vomit blood. Vritra could not attack Indra then, but he permitted him to rest. When Indra had rested, they began to fight again. Vritra said, I will try to kill you with my trident and avenge Vishwarupa's death, but since you have been blessed by Vishnu, you will in all probability kill me with your Vajra. Who can win without Vishnu's support? The demon hurled the trident at Indra, but Indra cut it with the Vajra, and with the Vajra he next sliced off Vritra's right hand, but Vritra took up a club in his left hand and hit Indra so hard that the Vajra was dislodged from Indra's hand. It lay there on the ground, and Indra was too ashamed to pick it up. Come on, Indra, said Vritra, pick up the Vajra and kill me. Don't waste time, and I am eager to die and meet Vishnu. Saying this, Vritra picked up another club in his left hand, but this time Indra sliced off Vritra's left hand with his Vajra. Vritra opened his mouth wide and tried to swallow up Indra and Airavata, and before he could do anything, Indra realized that he was inside Vritra's stomach. But he cut open Vritra's stomach with the Vajra and then sliced off Vritra's head as well. Vritra's body was so thick that it took 360 days for the entire head to be severed. The gods were delighted, but Indra was still not at peace with himself. Vritra had been a Brahmana and Indra had committed the sin of killing a Brahmana. The sin followed him around wherever he went. Finally, Indra went and hid in Manasa Saravara lake. He hid inside the stem of a lotus flower in the lake and stayed there for thousands and thousands of years. While Indra was awaking, Nahusha ruled as Indra, but eventually the severity of the sin was diminished. Indra returned and performed an Aswamedha Yagna as complete atonement for the sin.